In this session, we want to address the why of our D group system. Why did we start D groups? Important question, right? We want you to know the why behind our philosophy, not just what we're doing. Well, there are four main reasons why D groups are a reality here at our church. One of them is just the sobering reality of cultural Christianity within our church and country. The sobering reality of cultural Christianity. It's estimated that around 60 to 80% of young people will leave church out of high school. Fewer than 1 of 5 Christians, people who claim to be born-again Christians, have a worldview that's even fundamental to basic biblical beliefs. Only about half the people who say they regularly attend church do. The percentage of men who regularly view pornography inside and outside the church is roughly the same. When we look at the state of Christianity in America, it's a sobering reality that people are involved but not really growing as disciples of Jesus. And so we wanted to ask as a church, what can we do to help meet that problem? Another way to illustrate this, there was a pastor in Tennessee named Robbie Gallaty who was commissioned by the Southern Baptist Convention to study discipleship. And so they looked at all the numbers, which is, I believe, the largest denomination in North America for the last 20 years. And what they found was that 7 million people had been baptized, and yet there was a decline in church attendance. That there were only 4 million people attending churches. What that tells us is there's a disconnect between churches doing discipleship, right? They're getting people to come, they're getting people to be baptized, but then they're not sticking out their faith. And so there's a sober reality there that we believe that D groups are not the magic bullet, but that intentional relational discipleship leads to greater maturity and conviction. 2, there was a recognition within our church that community groups cannot be a one-size-fits-all solution for discipleship. We know as a church we're called to do discipleship, then the question becomes how? And most often churches kind of have this 2-wing model of our large gathering and then small groups. And what we begin to realize with small groups is there were some inherent challenges there. One, small groups are larger in size. If you have small groups in the 15 to 20 range, it's really hard to do discipleship. 2, small groups is a varied environment. You have people who have maybe been Christians for 20 years and people who have been Christians for 1 year, people who have been at the church for 10 years and people who have been at the church for 1 month. You have all those people coming in and out. That's a challenge. Another challenge is just the cyclical nature of small groups. People transition either out of the church or out of the city. People transition out of the small group because of multiplication. Maybe they move to a different part of the city, and so it's hard to build momentum with discipleship with all the transients. Another reality we saw is that it was hard to put the pressure on a small group leader to lead discipleship, to lead mission, and to care for 15 to 20 people. We often found our leaders burning out. And so the model that we've envisioned for our church, I think of as 3 circles. Imagine the biggest circle being our Sunday gathered, where we come to experience God, to be the visible presence of God's people, to love and care for one another. Our smaller groups are the kind of first step of community and connection, where we come to be known and to know, where we learn how to engage our neighborhoods on mission. And then D groups are the smallest circle. They're the smallest group where you have more intentionality, a further challenge, assignments and memorization, deeper levels of accountability. And so these three environments within our church are not meant to compete, but they're meant to complement one another. That the D group circle isn't the end of the journey. It's a part of the journey that hopefully will reinforce all three of the circles within the life of our church. So the first is the sobering reality of Christianity in America. The second is we realized our small groups couldn't do everything. The third is conviction to model our ministry after the mission and methods of Jesus. And what we see when we see the ministry and methods of Jesus is that around 80% of his time was focused on the 12 disciples. Yes, he taught the crowds. Yes, he healed and traveled from town to town. But he had a vision beyond the crowds. He wanted to train other men so that when he was gone, they might continue to the next generation. And so, again, discipleship groups are a piece of the discipleship puzzle in our church, but we want to model our ministry after the mission and the methods of Jesus by investing in a few. And finally, fourth, we believe this is one of the most strategic ways to reach the world. That if we equip God's people to know God, to love God, to know God's word, to love God's word, to know how to have healthy relationships, to understand, to live, and to share the gospel, we believe that type of discipleship changes the world. That the mission of the church is going to be advanced by everyday, ordinary people. And so the further energy, time, and resources and equipping that we give to everyday, ordinary people, the more they will be likely to reach the nooks and crannies of this city and in this world. So those are the four things that really compel us of why we want to do D groups and do them well here at Sojourn Church.